Say, will somebody please pass the ketchup?
This is a tasty burger.
I'll take a Gordon's burger and a side of Jason fingers.
Don't skip on the meat. I got a real good eye for prime meat.
Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and movies worth fighting over. I'm Noah Hook, and welcome to the second ever H&H debate. In this discussion-based competition, three players will debate each other over a variety of questions, with the goal of proving their answer is the best. These questions will usually be based around horror, but could also wander into hamburgers or general cinema at any point. Here to help me judge the debates today is my buddy Dan, otherwise known as the Four Mood Groups. Dan was on the first debate and did a hell of a job, and I'm certain he'll be a fair, very impartial judge. Dan, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Noah, thanks very much for having me.
We also have three fierce movie fanatics here today to duke it out. They have been talking mad smack in the group chat. They are ready for war. First up, we have a familiar face, Josh from Movie Timelines. Thanks for being here, Josh. Do you have any fun videos you're working on right now?
I have Movie Timelines, the Horror Timelines episode 100, which was going to be around 2 hours long.
Oh, awesome. Up next, we have a new face on the channel, Sarah. She is a lover of classic horror like Amicus and Hammer Studios, and also works on a ton of projects ranging from voice acting to writing short stories, anthologies, and novels. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Noah. I'm super excited.
Awesome. And last but not least, we have your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete. He also has a fun channel you should check out. And as right now, he is rating the kills in the Friday the 13th franchise. And Pete, you're also doing a new series called Horror Movie Superlatives, right?
Yeah, correct. Collaborating with a really good friend of mine, Carlin Cook, who also has a YouTube channel. So we're going through the entire decade of the 80s, year by year, and we're picking out like 7 categories: most amazing, so bad it's good; most unique, best gore; most overrated, most underrated, and WTF. We don't know what the other person is picking. So then we're presenting our videos, and then people are voting on who they thought had the better picks, whether it resembles them or the best justification. And great feedback we're getting on a lot. We're learning about new movies. Other people, I think what I'm getting the most out of it, people are like, they never heard of The Burning because I had The Burning as most underrated. So someone went to go watch The Burning. They said, hey, Uncle Pete, that movie was great. So yeah, the feedback has been fantastic. And I am currently at Camp Crystal Lake counting the kills, and I keep hearing this weird noise in the background. Masks are going missing, and I don't know what's going to happen. We'll have to wait and see.
Awesome. So yeah, today the three of you will be fighting to get the most out of 13 possible points. We'll start with 3 rounds of debate, which were given to you beforehand, so you'd have time to research your answers as well as your opponents. Each round is going to be worth 2 points, and the 2 players with the most points will move on to the speed round. If we have a 3-way tie or a 1-way sweep, there will be a tiebreaker, but we'll worry about that if it happens. And yeah, once we hit the speed round, it'll be a race to 13. And to be clear, Dan and I will primarily be choosing winners each round based on your arguments, not just the answers that we agree with most. But yeah, I think we're ready to debate, unless you guys have any questions.
Let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. With films like Firestarter and Orphan First Kill coming out, it seems children are still very scary to people. What is the scariest child in a horror movie? Uncle Pete, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I went with Damien from The Omen. He's the son of the devil, the Antichrist. And he's a kid who's only 5 years old, and he was responsible for the death of at least 6 people that died in horrible ways. And most of them didn't even see their death coming. He couldn't be defeated by a priest or even by a 17-year-old girl. And Damien wins at the end. People couldn't even get to him, even in an effort to stop him. You know, Nanny killed herself because of her love for Damien. He's got these evil Rottweilers who are supposed to be jackals protecting him. So no one could even get to him. He even got a creepy little smile at the end. And then when Josh covered the Omen, he said, look at that smug little son of a bitch. So Josh even noticed how creepy Damien was being in that movie. And you didn't even know what he can do next. And when you don't know the unknown, can be even more creepy than knowing what's going on.
Awesome. Josh, would you like to follow that up?
Yeah, sure. I went with Reagan from The Exorcist. And really quick, I'm going to take a look at the list of IMDb's ranked scariest movies of all time. Oh, gee, number one is The Exorcist. Oh, what a big surprise. You know, when you went out on the street and asked probably 20 people, what's the scariest movie of all time? What are they going to say? The Exorcist. And why do you think that they chose The Exorcist as the scary movie of all time? Do you think it was the priest character? Maybe the priest was the scary character. Oh, maybe it was the mom. Maybe the mom was the scariest character. No, it was Reagan, because she's the scary little girl, scary little demon girl. And she's the scariest kid in all of horror movies, in the scariest movie of all time.
Beautiful. All right, Sarah.
Oh, my learned colleagues have both made excellent points. However, both of their choices are precluded upon the fact that one is related to the devil and one is possessed by the devil. Reagan on her own is not a scary child. She's a very sweet and loving little kid that suddenly is possessed by the devil, and the devil is what makes her scary. Damien's relationship to Satan is what makes him scary, and it's the people around him making sure that he lives that keeps him alive, not Damien himself. So therefore, I put forward that the creepiest kid in all of horror is Luke from Better Watch Out. He is human. He starts off, you think he's sweet, but then you see behind the mask that he is a tiny little sociopath who will do whatever he has to do to get what he wants. Girl turns down his advances, figures out that he's playing a prank on her. What's the first thing he does? Texts her boyfriend to come over and then starts killing people. Killing methodically throughout the entire rest of the film. Everybody that comes in contact with this kid either dies or almost dies and manages to save herself by the sliver of a chance. But there is then another wrinkle thrown in that at the end, because he seems so sweet and lovable on the surface, his parents are going to take him to the hospital to see the girl that he didn't manage to kill, and he's going to kill her there at the hospital. Creepiest kid, realistic creepiest kid. No devil involved, completely human. That is the greatest terror.
We have 10 minutes for debate and begin now.
I can't find some kid creepy who can be stopped by a swift punch into the nose and he will crumble to the floor. That's not just creepy to me. If you just smack him across the mouth, he's going to fall to the floor and, cry in a puddle. But Sarah did bring up a good point about Reagan. Reagan necessarily was not the creepy one. You can argue that it was Pazuzu possessing her, because as soon as Pazuzu left her body, she's back to this sweet little girl. She was only creepy because Pazuzu was inhabiting her, possessing her. Damien is the Antichrist, scheduled to, pretty much take over the world. People were killing for him. People killed themselves for him. He had protectors. No one could get to Damien. That is more terrifying. And I think Josh agrees that Damien is scary, because when he covered the Omen series, he's talking about the 666 tattoo. He had a funny joke. He went to go check on Stella to make sure she didn't have a 666 tattoo, because, hey, that's really creepy if a kid has this tattoo. He didn't do that when he covered the Exorcist series, because the Exorcist Reagan is not creepy. It was actually Pazuzu.
Let me ask you a question, though, because I think maybe I'm confused. But what is the question? I believe the question is, who's the scariest kid in horror, not the scariest kid that is entirely a kid and not possessed by an outside influence. It's a kid. Reagan, the character in a movie, is a kid possessed by a devil. It's the devil in the form of a kid. So you can argue the semantics about it and say, like, oh, well, it's not really a kid, it's actually the devil. But you know what? When you're watching a movie, it's a little kid. And that is the argument, because you could also argue that Damien isn't necessarily just a kid because he has the devil's influence whatsoever. And what's the point of that? The question that I ask you is what defines the scariness of these characters? And here's the question I'll ask all of you. You get to be in a room, just you, alone, with any of these characters. It's you and the kid from Better Watch Out in a room. It's you and Damien alone in a room. And it's you and Reagan alone in a room. Who are you picking?
I'm picking Damien or Reagan. I have been alone in a room with kids like Luke. It is not fun, especially when they can charm the pants off anybody they come into contact with. And if you were to fight back with a child like Luke, all they have to say is, I have no idea why this person punched me in the face. They're not going to believe the adult. They are going to believe the child that is looking like a normal, sweet, innocent little kid that doesn't have a history of having any issues whatsoever. They're
interesting. So in that story, you get out of that room alive. Okay. That's the room I'm going to go with.
I only got out alive because I changed physicians at where I work.
And
I'm saying in this hypothetical scenario, if you attack the little kid, you can get into trouble. That's the worst case scenario if you're in a room with Luke. If you're in a room with Luke and you are the only reason why he is even remotely scary is because people don't know what he's capable of. The second that you know what he's capable of, one punch in the face takes him out. That's it. That's it. There's nothing scary about that. There's nothing scary about a normal human.
But how
child.
are you going to prove it? Unless there are cameras in that room, unless you have proof that this is what this child does, you have no leg to stand on.
See, but your argument
I'll be okay
Reagan,
with
your argument goes for Reagan and Damien also. They're younger kids, so you're even getting more trouble for striking a younger kid. And
yes, but
Reagan can look nice and sweet. Damien looks nice and sweet. So of course you're gonna go in a room.
Hold on,
because like we said, one punch.
Here's the thing, though.
I would like to point out in that scenario, you are leaving the room alive, which you most likely would not do in a room.
Hold on. If I don't attempt to kill Damien and I don't attempt to kill Reagan, nothing's gonna happen to me. A kid like Luke may just decide one day, hey, I'm going to target you and you're not going to make it out. And they might say, hey, you want to have Made in China written all over your body? If I throw this heated towel at you, nobody's going to know because there aren't any cameras and you're going to get burned. Super fun.
Wait, you're saying if you don't try to kill Reagan, nothing will happen to you? Tell that to Bert, because he's currently at the bottom of a flight of stairs in a crumpled up mall.
In the book, there is a reason why that happens to Burke. And that is why it happens in the movie. So there was a reasoning.
I'm sorry. Is the question of this who's the scariest kid in a book? Oh, no, it's not. It's the scariest kid in a movie.
I'm saying there is a justification for what she did to Burke.
You can actually get to Luke. Now, you may be in trouble for striking a child, but you can get to Luke. Nobody was able to get to Damien. He didn't have to do anything because he had all these followers willing to die, kill themselves.
But here's the thing. That means, Uncle Pete, that Damien's not the real threat. His followers are the threat.
Because
it's nothing to do with Damien.
Kid. He has
but it's followers. Not anything to do with Damien. It's all because he's the son of the devil.
Who's more dangerous, the cult followers or the cult leader? The cult leader is the one who controls the followers in sense.
5-year-old little Damien was not in charge.
Damien and Reagan are more scary. I don't even think Luke is in competition because Damien and Reagan have supernatural powers that inherently will make them more scary. So if you're stuck in a room with those three, obviously Luke is the easy one to go.
Well, and also I will point out that without his followers, Damien didn't last very long, considering that his dad was inches away from very easily killing him. The only reason why Damien was not killed was by the timely intervention of the police, which was total and complete circumstance. And I also want to point out, because you mentioned earlier, that Reagan was defeated, but Reagan was not, the Pazuzu was not defeated. No. The only thing that happened was a priest died and killed himself in order to get the demon out of the little girl. That's it. Pazuzu kind of won.
Yep.
But to get away from Pazuzu, all you had to do was exit the room. People across the street, down the road, weren't affected by Pazuzu. To get away from Reagan, or really Pazuzu, all you have to do is leave the room. People across town were killed because of Damien, and Luke, again, all you got to do is smack him across the face.
But were they affected by Pazuzu, considering that Pazuzu's whole purpose was to stir up fear and resentment and concern? And that seemed to happen quite a bit at the ending, because you've got a dead priest and people scared of a little girl and people unsure of what happened. It sure seemed to actually accomplish exactly what the demon was trying to do in the first place, which was to sow fear and anxiety.
I completely concur with Josh, but the thing is, it's Pazuzu that's the creepy thing. It's not Reagan, it's Pazuzu. Pazuzu is the terror. He's not in the form of a kid. He's possessing a child. Yeah. And it's still not the child that's the scary part. It's the possession that's the scary part.
Semantics.
It is the possession. It doesn't matter if he's in Reagan or he's in the killer in the third part. Still Pazuzu, just changed into hanging out in a different form. He's still scary when he's in the priest. It has nothing to do with Reagan. It is all about Pazuzu. It is about Pazuzu through all 5 films, both the prequels, all 3 movies, Exorcists 1, 2, and 3. It's all about Pazuzu.
But again, it's semantics, because again, in the previous debate, when we were discussing scary dogs, one of the scary dogs that was chosen was the Thing dog. Now, is that not a dog because it's an alien? No, it's an alien in the form of a dog. So therefore, it is a scary dog.
There is a difference, though. The alien is a shape-shifting individual.
What's the difference?
Shape-shifting individual.
Inhabiting the body of somebody.
A demon on its own is scary, is terrifying. Any movie about demons, you've got Evil Dead, you've got Fallen, anything involving demons is scary inherently. However, Reagan, without a demon, not scary. She's a normal little kid. She's a little 12-year-old kid who just wants to play around and talk to Captain Howdy.
Well, it's a good thing that in the movie that she does have a demon, because that's what we're discussing.
That is all that makes her scary, is that demon.
But I think we're arguing semantics here. Because
the thing about Luke that makes him scary is his psyche. It is how he thinks and how he processes everything around him. He is a tiny little sociopath. He can manipulate people. He can get people to believe him and make them think that he is sweet and innocent when he is not. He is a stone cold-blooded killer.
That
and
argument
he will
goes
do
for Damien.
anything.
Okay,
that
guys,
argument
that's about 10
minutes. Damien, as far Damien is technically manipulating these people to think he's this sweet, adorable kid.
Uncle
Luke
Pete,
is just an immature child. I would not be scared if I was in a room with Luke. If I'm in a room with the Antichrist, or if I'm in a room with Reagan, I'm going to be way more scared in a room with those two than with some 12-year-old kid. He's not scary or intimidating because he has a friend that he manipulated and parents who are easily manipulated as well. That doesn't make him scary.
Yeah, we've hit 10 minutes. Turn this into your closing argument.
Sure. My competitors bring up great points. I have to side with Josh a little bit more, but definitely not Luke. He's a young kid who I don't find scary when you can simply punch him in the nose and he would stop. If you're not easily manipulated, you're not going to fall for Luke's BS. Yeah, Reagan was a scary kid. It was more shock value with her. But at the end, she was back to normal. She wasn't scary anymore. Damien had followers. He had people kill themselves, kill each other, do anything to protect that little kid. And he pretty much wins at the end between these other 3. He's the son of the devil who's going to continue on with a larger legacy, I believe, than Pazuzu or even Luke.
I would like to close by stating scariest movie of all time on a list where The Omen is number 58 and Better Watch Out isn't even listed. So maybe not so scary there. But again, I want to point out that the semantics of whether or not it's the demon or not doesn't really matter when you're watching a movie and you see a little kid. That's really what it comes down to. You're, as an audience and a viewer, you're looking at a little kid and you're terrified of them. And the notion of whether or not they are possessed, you're looking at your own kid slightly differently. And I do think Pazuzu completely and totally wins at the ending, and everything is not smooth and great. And honestly, if you were to have me face off against any one of these three kids, I'm not picking Reagan. I can easily beat up the kid from Better Watch Out. Easily. I can take Damien too. I think I could beat the crap out of that kid. I don't know if I could take Reagan. That's not who I want to fight.
Both of my colleagues have presented very good points. However, as Josh has said, Pazuzu is the one who is making things scary. Reagan on her own, not scary. It is entirely about Pazuzu for all 5 movies in the Omen series. Pazuzu every single time. It's not Reagan every single time, it's Pazuzu. In the Omen, Damien isn't scary until you get to part 3, when he is an adult and is making calculations on how to take over the world. Luke is in actuality a child, a human child with the mind of a sociopath who can manipulate situations and can cause intense harm to the people around him if he so chooses. You may not think that you may think that you could just punch him in the nose. Well, yeah, you might be able to punch him in the nose, but then you're getting carted off for assaulting a child. And there is nothing you can do about it, because nobody's going to take a look at Luke and take a look at either of you two gentlemen and say, yeah, the kid had it coming. Sure. I rest my case.
Great. Fantastic arguments for this first round. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I like Sarah's argument about the devil in that, the possession, because I don't believe in, demons and devils, despite the fact that I'm wearing a maiden shirt. So while she does make a point that I think that makes them a little less scary for some audience members. She also said at some point that demons were inherently scary, to try to say that Pazuzu is really the focus of the Regan thread. I don't agree, because I don't think demons are scary. So I kind of feel like the argument kind of is weird in that way. I also think the strength of argument is the weakness, because I don't think that Luke is the best example of an unpossessed normal child that's scary in movies. But really, neither Pete nor Josh brought that up. I think there probably are better examples of just normal scary kids in movies, in horror movies. Having said all of that, I feel like Damien is also scarier than Reagan. And I think Pete hit the points that I would have made too, which are important, which are the area of influence of Damien is bigger. The devil, in my understanding of what the devil is way bigger than Pazuzu. I see the beginning of his life as the son of the devil. The little smug look at the end. He has the followers, which are much more far-reaching. I feel like in The Exorcist, if you're not in that house, somehow in the crosshairs of Pazuzu, I feel like you're not even aware of what's going on there. Whereas anybody sort of in the area of Damien's life seems to be affected. It's a much greater area. And I think with the followers, Pete had hinted at how much wider an area that terror is. So, I would honestly, in the thinnest of margins, because thinking about all 3 of these characters going in, I could really see the argument going any of these 3 ways, but I would just by a smidge go with Damien.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of discussion around Reagan predominantly, and like a lot of arguments and counter arguments for Reagan. And I think the same for Luke, but there was really just a lot of presentation for why Damien is the scariest and why he's the most powerful out of the group and the most deadly. And there were not a lot of great counter arguments to that. So I agree. I think the first 2 points are going to go to Uncle Pete.
I also wanted to add, just, for future reference, and I may have, just as a tipping my hand as a judge, if you like, I don't really respond to the fact that it was the scariest movie in IMDb. I think it's important to throw it out there, but that's not a strength argument to me, and that Better Watch Out was not listed. Because I don't really respect giant groups of people's opinions per se. In this case, I think they have it right that it's a scary movie, but at the same time, and Josh didn't focus only on that, but I'm just like, that's a throwaway for me.
Yeah, I think the thing that clinched it for me is that both of Reagan and Luke are both pretty much stuck inside a house for like their scope of crime. Uncle Pete made a great argument for Damien being able to do things that like he isn't even there and he's like taking people out. Great round, everyone. I think that was a very close argument.
Awesome.
But are y'all ready for round 2?
Sure.
Go.
Awesome. Question number 2. If a new Nightmare on Elm Street remake had to happen, what living actor should play Freddy Krueger? Sarah, would you like to start this one?
I would love to. I posit that Michael Rooker would make a fantastic Freddy. He has the horror pedigree. His first film was Henry Portrait of the Serial Killer, which is iconic. He has continued to do horror throughout his career. Most recently, he appeared on Creepshow, the new series on Shudder. He loves horror movies. He's got the acting chops for it. He's also got the comedic chops should they decide to take Freddy into that cheesy one-liner route again. Everybody knows, I'm Mary Poppins, y'all. He can do it. He's got everything you need to make a fantastic Freddy. He's got a look, he's got the chops, and he's got the sense of humor. It would be fantastic.
Uncle Pete, would you like to go next?
Sure. My selection would be Joaquin Phoenix. He was outstanding in The Joker, won an Academy Award and a Golden Globe for Best Actor. He played Commodus in Gladiator. These are two complex characters, and he killed it in both. Joaquin Phoenix is known for his challenging and intense roles, not afraid to play a character who might not be easy for audiences to like. So he's an excellent choice for Freddy Krueger because you're not supposed to like him, but Joaquin Phoenix can actually make you like Freddy Krueger like he did with The Joker. I think he can embody any role and take that role. He could take the role of a twisted icon like Freddy and turn him into Academy Award worthy character like he did with the Joker, who's one of the most evil and sadistic villains in comic culture. He can be frightening and charming, and you want a leading man. And Joaquin Phoenix is a leading man, and he can lead the role in Nightmare on Elm Street future movie.
Josh?
I chose Robert Englund. Do I even have to say anything more? Do I even have to have an argument for this? Robert Englund is Freddy. If he's alive, you make him Freddy. What's the point of having anybody other than the man that is the role? They had Jackie Earle Haley, a guy who has an Oscar for Freddy. And the biggest complaint about him was he's not Robert Englund. So if you're making a movie, obviously you go with the guy that is the character. And it's Robert Englund. I don't think I have to say anything more.
Awesome. Well, I think on that note, let's debate.
So do you want a remake or a sequel? If it's a sequel, you can have Robert Englund. And I'm not knocking Robert Englund. He is the best. No one will ever hold a candle to him. But for a remake, you want something a little different for it to be a successful remake. Look at the 3 most successful remakes out there: The Fly, The Thing, and The Blob. They did something just a little bit different, and it was a successful remake. Remakes are touchy. I think if you had Robert Englund, it's just going to be another sequel.
So let me ask you a question, though.
Robert Englund, he's fantastic.
On that
Joaquin
note,
Phoenix took a character like the Joker and getting an Academy Award. He's a leading man. Michael Rooker is also a good choice, but Henry is a different character than Freddy. He's evil,
hey, on your
yes.
on your remake note, though, which was the iconic character from The Fly or The Thing that was being reproduced in one of those remakes? Which was one of those iconic characters that was a pop cultural landmark?
I said they changed certain aspects, so you want to change certain things.
Right. But if you're bringing forward the same character and you want to have that same flavor, even if you were doing a remake, why not still just have it be Freddy Krueger, but have it be somewhat different? What was New Nightmare then? I mean, New Nightmare was essentially a different series, and they still included Robert Englund playing a completely different kind of Freddy Krueger, and he nailed it. And that was a different take on Freddy that was not the same as the previous versions, and he still did a great job on it. So I don't really see the difference.
I think it's
and
an easy answer going with Freddy Krueger.
And
I think it's an easy answer going with Fred Krueger. And I think Joaquin Phoenix can do the role. He can be charming. He can be scary. He can be intriguing, which are aspects of Freddy Krueger.
But see, I disagree that Joaquin Phoenix can be scary in the way that you need
Right.
Freddy to be scary in, because Joaquin Phoenix's strength is making you sympathize with his villain, because you understood why he was as twisted as he was in Gladiator. He disturbed you a little bit and he freaked you out a little bit, but I was never afraid of him. He was just like this creepy dude, his creepy, whiny little brat. And the Joker was all about making you sympathize with this character and understand why they went over the edge. I don't want to understand why Freddy went over the edge. He's a child molester. I don't want to see sympathetic. I don't want to see him played in a nice kind of way. I want to be completely repulsed by him. And I've never been repulsed by Joaquin Phoenix. He has a lot of range, but his strength is in making characters that you feel for. And Michael Rooker, I feel kind of the similar thing. I love Michael Rooker, but he doesn't have that range. I mean, Michael Rooker plays either like growly, grumpy old man or goofy, grumpy, growly old man. I mean, when he was younger, I feel like he maybe could have played, like maybe Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer era Michael Rooker could have done it. But nowadays, not so much. And he's kind of a little old for the role at this particular point, which you might want to say about Robert Englund. But again, you don't have to bridge that gap of, oh, hey, he's too old and he's not Robert Englund, because he's Robert Englund.
See, well, you can't knock Michael Rooker for something that also encompasses Robert Englund, because you're arguing against your own point. I can't argue anything against. I'll say Michael Rooker. I'll agree with you that Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer era, maybe yes. I just think Joaquin Phoenix has the acting chops. He hasn't played a scary actor role yet, but did Robert Englund really play somebody terrifying before he played Freddy Krueger? He had other roles, but he didn't play anybody terrifying because he had the acting chops. I think Joaquin Phoenix has the acting chops to go there, because he was able to take certain villains and make them sympathetic. You don't want to make Freddy sympathetic, but it just shows that the acting chops that he has, that he would be able to do it.
I want to let Sarah had something.
Gentlemen, the one thing that goes against for Robert Englund is that he said he's hung up his Freddy hat. He's not coming back to the role, and therefore we need to move on and find a new Freddy should they remake it. Now, I would argue that Jackie Earle Haley did a fine job as Freddy. He was not given a script that was worthy of the role, and therefore that's what made his take on the character not as well received as Robert Englund. It wasn't Jackie Earle Haley's fault. It was the movie. The movie just sucks. And you keep saying that Michael Rooker no longer has the chops. Just because you haven't been playing those types of characters doesn't mean you can no longer play them. I haven't performed in a very long time, but I can still act the hell out of anything. It has nothing to do with how much time has gone by. He's working with the roles he's been offered. I believe if you were to offer Michael Rooker this role, he would take it and he would chew the scenery like there was no tomorrow, and it would be a fantastic Freddy. He would be menacing. He would be funny. He would be just everything you thought you wanted for a remake version of Nightmare. He just needs the right script, and I think we could completely bypass the horrors of the remake that we recently had. And Joaquin Phoenix, I have to agree with Josh. He's sympathetic. That's what he does. He makes horrible people seem sympathetic. And I do not want to sympathize with Freddy unless you're going to take on the take that Freddy did not molest those kids and that the kids made it all up, all of the McMartin satanic panic trial. Well, that is the only way that I would be able to accept a Joaquin Phoenix Freddy.
You're assuming he's going to play sympathetic. I'm simply using his acting chops as an example. If you can do this, there's other stuff you're capable of doing. And both you bring up the fact that Freddy Krueger molested children. That was in the remake. It was maybe implied in the original. But
it was part of the original. They just cut out a little bit of the thing. I've seen the scene.
If it cut out, it didn't happen. You're bringing up aspects of the original of him being a child molester. Yes, he killed little kids and everything. But
even if he's not a molester, he's a child murderer, which I don't really know. I don't really know if it's much.
There's not a much difference.
I'm bringing up what you got.
Sympathy.
What you two have said. I don't want to be sympathetic for Freddy, but somebody who can take a character and bring them into an Academy Award winning role, that means they have the acting chops. Sarah brought up a good point about the script. You give Joaquin Phoenix that good script, he can take that character and make you laugh with him, laugh at him, and be scared of him, because he's done that with other roles. He can play sadistic, he can play funny, he can play charismatic.
But I don't think he has done that before. I don't think we've seen that from him.
No.
And again, I think that is something that could have been, that is something the way that he could have been portrayed in Gladiator. That Gladiator could have been that sadistic kind of like fearsome character, but that's not the direction that he took. He took a different direction. But I do want to point out that Sarah had mentioned that Robert Englund had hung up his Freddy hat and was done with the role. But let's face it, if somebody brought him a bunch of money and said, we want you for this part, you think he's really going to say, oh yeah, I'm done with that. Yeah, like exactly the same way that Bruce Campbell has been done with Ash 3 different times now. Let's face it. They're never done with the character when money is involved.
Yes, but then it's a sequel, not a remake. Uncle Pete is correct with that. It would be a sequel, not a remake. And we're specifically talking about remakes, a remake, a reboot of the franchise.
I don't know if that was the question. I thought the question was a new Nightmare, like if they were to make Nightmare on Elm Street today, who would it be? But it doesn't have, but again, I don't understand where the concept of having Robert Englund play the same character in a new version of the script would be a remake, would be a sequel. You could have the same character play the same part in a new version of the movie. Like, I don't necessarily understand why that would have to be the way to do it. Like, I think if you did a remake and Robert Englund was playing Freddy again, I don't think people, if it was an entirely new set of events and basically a retelling of the story, I don't think people would be confused and be like, I don't get it. It's the same actor, so this has to be a sequel. No, that wouldn't happen. You would know that it was a new version based upon the fact that everything was kind of new. I don't see that as happening.
But do you want your remakes to be something different or the exact same thing? Because like,
just because you have the same actor, you can have the same actor and have everything else be different, and be just because you're including a single actor doesn't make it the exact same thing.
But I'm not going to say Robert Englund would be a bad choice. No, I'm just saying I think that's the easy answer on who you want to do. Yeah,
the easy, obvious, best answer.
Robert Englund. I think that it's the easy answer, and I think Joaquin Phoenix also has acting chops that he can do it. Michael Rooker is good, yes, but you look at the entire pedigree. And you're handing someone a good script. Sarah brought up a good point about a good script. Look at the entire pedigree. You hand him a good script. I think he could kill it as Fred Krueger.
I would just like to point out for the record that Uncle Pete said it would be the easy answer, because it's the obvious and right answer. It's easy because it's the clear way to go. That's why
you want a sequel. If you want a sequel, not a remake.
Y'all, if y'all want to start your closing arguments, you can go in whatever order you like.
Sarah?
I would like to point out, I am not against Robert Englund playing Freddy. I adore Robert Englund. He is a treasure. He is an icon. However, if he were to take up the mantle again, it would not be a remake. And we were asked specifically about remaking the franchise. Joaquin Phoenix is a fantastic actor. I do not think that he would, 1, accept the role as Freddy. And 2, I don't think that he would bring anything new to the table in that particular role. I think it would just be Joaquin Phoenix as playing Freddy Krueger. And I don't think we would have any suspension of disbelief for that particular thing. Joaquin Phoenix is very much a real world kind of guy. I do think that Michael Rooker would take it, make it his own, and make it a fun experience for us horror lovers, and that we would all be very happy with his performance.
Yeah, I'll take it up next. The question is, if a new Nightmare on Elm Street remake had to happen, and I don't understand why the concept, I don't understand why everybody's so hung up on the notion that if you had Robert Englund as Freddy, that would automatically not make it a remake. That's a very odd tactic, because you could very easily have the same actor in a remake. It makes perfect sense to do so. And also Joaquin Phoenix, he's Joaquin Phoenix. If you put him in the role, there's nobody is going to actually see Freddy Krueger. They're only going to see Joaquin Phoenix. And it's an excellent point. But that point also applies to Michael Rooker. The same exact point applies to him. It would be Michael Rooker as Freddy Krueger. And Freddy Krueger, the only character that you're not going to see as somebody else playing that character is Robert Englund. And unless you go with a total unknown, that'd be the only other way to do it. Because any other way you go, people are going to say, that's not Freddy, exactly like they did when Kane Hodder wasn't Jason in Freddy versus Jason, exactly like they did when Jackie O'Haley wasn't Freddy in the other remake. People just want to see Freddy Krueger played by Robert Englund, and they're correct.
I think you want a leading man to play Fred Krueger. Michael Rooker, I think he was a leading man. I haven't seen him lead a movie in a while. And with your opinion, with Josh, you saying, Robert Englund, why not just bring back Heather Langenkamp? Why not just bring back Johnny Depp and have them play different roles? Now, it's a remake, so Freddy's going after adults. So why don't you because they killed it in their role, so why don't you just bring them back? It's not a remake. I think people would perceive it as a sequel if you say, oh, Robert Englund's playing Freddy again. People are automatically going to think a sequel. I think Joaquin Phoenix has the acting chops. He's a leading man. Just like Robert Englund, they didn't know he could do it before he took Freddy. Same thing with Joaquin Phoenix and the Joker. He proved he can take a role and go with it and make it his own. And I think he could easily do that with Freddy Krueger.
Awesome. Once again, a very good round of debate. This one I'm still kind of torn on. I think there are a lot of good points from all three sides. Yeah, Dan, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, going in, since the judges knew the answers ahead of time too, I thought it was basically going to be an uphill battle for Sarah and Pete because the best answer is Robert Englund. I think so. Then they have to come up with arguments as to why he's not the best answer. Pete obviously can't really use this is the easy way out because he picked Damien for the scariest kid, so it's not like he was giving himself a challenge there. Sarah does deserve some credit for picking some deep cuts, but I'll say that I don't. The other thing about the sequel versus remake thing, I think that's just again trying to throw an argument against the wall to see if that sticks, and it doesn't stick for me. That doesn't make it a sequel or a remake. It's Robert Englund. At the beginning of the movie, you would clearly know if they're remaking the story or whatever. That casting doesn't affect that. Sarah's argument that Robert hung up the hat. Again, Josh specifically says, yes, he would come out of it for money. Clearly, that's the truth. But the other thing is, I think the question implies that you can cast who you want. And this doesn't really get into I like the argument, but at the same time, I think Josh is right in saying, I'm going to pick who I want. And I think that's the right choice. And it's hard to say. A little bit of Joaquin Phoenix, his diversity of roles is fantastic, and he's just like an amazing actor. But I do have trouble kind of seeing past that all of his, like they were saying, a little sympathetic. Even psychopaths can be made sympathetic by somebody who's as good as Joaquin Phoenix, and it's hard to remove myself from that. So if I were to pick a non-Robert Englund, I would definitely pick Michael Rooker. And I kind of love the idea of that. I mean, I kind of like to see that Freddy. But at the same time, I think the better answer, just maybe by a smidge, is Robert Englund, because you're going to run into the problem where it's always going to be somebody other than Robert Englund. If he's still alive, he should be Freddy Krueger. And then it does boil down to writing and stuff, but then that's really not part of the question for me.
Yeah, I think both Josh and Sarah railed into Joaquin Phoenix being this usually sympathetic character, and I think he does have a great range, but I think the conversation never left the Joker or Gladiator, so I think that the argument kind of stuck within this conversation. And then I don't think we heard quite enough. I agree about your point about the semantics of it being, is it a remake or just something different? Because I think Josh's point about New Nightmare, I think that was enough to just kind of close that part of the argument out, because that was clearly a reboot or whatever you would want to call it. It wasn't necessarily a sequel. And I don't think we heard quite enough about Michael Rooker. As much as I love him to death, I would have loved to hear a little bit about Slither and his familiarity with practical effects being all over him for hours on end and things like that. So I think by just a hair, I'm going to give this one to Josh.
Good job, Josh.
Thank you.
Good job, everybody.
Yeah, that one, Robert Englund's a tough one.
Very good round. Very good round.
Question number 3. It has been rumored that Robert Eggers, Willem Dafoe, and Anya Taylor-Joy are coming together for a remake of Nosferatu, which I'm very excited about. But the question today is, what is the best vampire movie of all time?
What is the greatest vampire film of all time? Well, I posit that it is 1983's The Hunger, directed by Tony Scott, based on the novel by Whitley Strieber of the same name. You have David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve as vampires, the most stylish vampires you have ever seen in your life. You have Bauhaus on the soundtrack with Bela Lugosi's Dead. They're also in the movie. Goth Girl Dreams, yes, please. And then you have the whole thing being about vampires versus science. What happens if you do not actually stay young forever? You live forever, but you don't stay young forever. And what is the scientific outcome that could happen to help that situation? You have almost a nihilistic look at vampires and in a very real world grounded way. And the question of if you do live forever but can't stay young and you're addicted to blood, is it worth it? Is it worth actually staying alive and being a vampire? The whole thing is fantastic. It has influenced everything from music to other horror media. Take a look at She Wants Revenge's Written in Blood video. American Horror Story Hotel steals a lot from The Hunger. It has permeated the vampire genre since its inception. Everything that comes after it is influenced. And that's why I chose The Hunger.
I chose Fright Night. And this was kind of a tough pick but when I boiled it down, I had to really mull over, because we're talking about the best vampire movie of all time. So I had to think about what makes something the best vampire movie of all time. I think probably contrary to what we were talking about earlier, I think if you're calling something the best, it has to be something that will appeal to a wide variety of people. Because part of being the best is that people of pretty much any type can sit down and appreciate it. But I also think that the key word there is best vampire movie is the movie that best encapsulates a vampire. And honestly, Fright Night is the movie that tells a story of a vampire and sticks to the vampire lore and legend as written and takes advantage of those vampire rules within its context and purposefully tries to play with them, but not break those rules, and actually keeps it very traditional. It's a very traditional vampire story, just told in a modern setting. It's funny, it's interesting, it's got great characters, and it's all the classic vampire stuff that you want to see, just brought into a modern era. It's very mass appeal. I mean, the Dead Last voters voted it as the best vampire movie of all time. So, I mean, there's obviously some love there for the movie as well to appeal to a broad range of people. So clearly it's doing something that's right. And I think that there's a lot of movies that are the best vampire movies, and a lot of people have their personal takes on what the best vampire movie is. So for me, it was that movie that would also encompass a large number of people that also felt it was the best. And Fright Night to me is that one.
Like you said, the question was what we think the best vampire is. The first we were asked that question, the first movie that popped in my head was The Lost Boys. I think it's a fun, sexy, stylish, savage movie about vampires that has a killer soundtrack, and it's The Lost Boys. Yes, it has some camp and silliness, but so does a lot of every popular movies. But I love the performance of David and his clan. They're vampires that kind of they draw you in. You want to be with this little clan of vampires. Yeah, the Frog Brothers are played serious, and I think that kind of makes it fun. And I love the contrast between Sam and the Frog Brothers. I love the relationship between Michael and his brother Sam. He's got a great Jim Morrison thing going on as well. It's got a great twist at the ending. And similar to what Josh said, I think The Lost Boys can appeal to a more of a wider audience than the other two movies. I think it has more going for it and can appeal to more people.
So let's debate.
The question that was posited was the best vampire movie of all time. Not the best vampire comedy of all time, the best vampire movie of all time. I would also like to point out that both those movies, the main protagonists are not vampires. In The Hunger, the protagonists are the vampires. We're seeing the world through vampire eyes. We are seeing what is going on from a vampire's point of view. I love both those movies, but we, the human beings, are the fill-in characters. We're the main people in both of those flicks, and it's coming up against vampires and fighting the vampires. I think it's interesting that this is one of the first movies that is from a vampire's point of view. It is all about the vampires, how their world is affected by vampirism, by the rules of vampires. Everything that encompasses that movie is all about vampires, not people going up against them, not comedy. It's just about, if you were a vampire, what would your outlook be? What would happen to you? And would you still want to be one?
Well, the notion of the question isn't
of a vampire. I think you're also going with semantics, calling it a vampire comedy. It's still, you actually, is Fright Night a vampire movie? Yes. Is Lost Boys a vampire movie? Yes. They're not going to say no, it's a vampire comedy. Bram Stoker, Dracula, played by Bela Lugosi, arguably one of the most popular vampires. He had this allure. He had this allure to him. He was, technically he was, back then in the 1930s, that was a sexy vampire. Women were drawn into him. That's what I think when I look at a vampire, that's kind of what I want. Not a fruit bat. I like the look of the Lost Boys. As a young kid, I watched that movie. I wanted to be David and his clan. They were very cool vampires. David, Paul, Dwayne, and Marco. I thought they were really cool. The movie did have comedy, because sometimes a little comedy is in there. I think the movie has a lot going for it. Yes, it has camp, but I can argue Fright Night has camp with the like I said, sorry, Lost Boys has camp like with the half-naked saxophone player, but it adds into the movie. It makes it fun. It also did something a little bit different with vampires by putting the two teeth in the center. It still has the essence of vampires. And if you ask the average person, name 3 vampire movies, Fright Night and the Lost Boys are going to be brought up. I don't think that many people are going to bring up The Hunger. I just think it's sexy vampires that you want to be. There's an allure to it. Or taking Josh's point, I think it's going to appeal to a wider audience.
Can I point out from the semantics argument as well, too, that yes, the question is not what's the best vampire comedy of all time, but it's also not what's the best vampire art house flick of all time, or what's the best film focusing on vampires of all time. It's what's the best vampire movie. It doesn't matter what the role, like what role the vampire plays, doesn't really add into it. And honestly, the best vampire movie could be a movie where the vampire is the biggest villain possible. It can be a movie in which the vampire is the good guy, but honestly, it doesn't have to be. And especially with the way that the question is phrased, it will not have to be. But I also want to point out one thing really quickly here, because Uncle Pete is saying that he thinks The Lost Boys is the best vampire movie of all time, but he doesn't actually believe that. And do you want to know how I know that he doesn't believe that?
Because he brought up Dracula.
Because when he sent me his rankings, he did not rank The Lost Boys as the #1 vampire movie of all time.
Oh,
he actually ranked it as the second best vampire movie of all time. So even Pete doesn't believe his own argument that The Lost Boys is the best vampire movie of all time. Let me look at my rankings. What's #1? Fright Night. There you go. I believe back then, and I believe
pardon
now.
The pun, but that is an attempted dagger. But I stand by that. When the question was asked, that The Lost Boys it's what popped into my head. If I could be a vampire from all the vampire movies, I would want to be David, because that's the vampire I would want to be. I may not have done it for Dead Last comparing the other ones, but that's my choice now, because opinions can change. And if I could be any vampire, I would want to be David.
Uncle Pete, you brought up the fact that the vampires in The Lost Boys are super stylish. Well, I would argue that Jerry is also stylish in Fright Night, and you cannot get past the style of Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie in The Hunger. That is style for days. It is iconic. The opening of that movie, iconic. You've got Bauhaus singing. You've got her in this beautiful quintessential 80s upscale fashion lady outfit that is just oozing sexuality and class. And you have David Bowie dressed in one of his little suits that was very typical for him in the 80s, just looking so fine. Oh my goodness. You cannot look at those two and not say, oh my God, they don't look stylish. No.
It's kind of funny that everyone keeps on using the word stylish. And it's also funny that everyone keeps using the word quintessential 80s and 80s and 80s. And it is kind of ironic that all three of us chose a vampire movie from the 80s. But The Hunger absolutely feels like an 80s movie. The Lost Boys is absolutely an 80s movie. The only one of the three that feels a little timeless, I would argue that possibly the club scene does not feel very timeless, but Fright Night could exist in pretty much any decade. It doesn't feel insanely dated. Lost Boys is so dated. And you're talking about some of the camp elements. The camp elements of Lost Boys at this particular point are somewhat unintentional. The saxophone player was not meant to be humorous, but it is now because it's corny. Whereas Fright Night, the camp that you still watch, was all intentional. You're not laughing at anything that wasn't meant to be laughed at with Fright Night at this particular point. And again, The Hunger, it's a movie that really only existed in the 80s. Like if you watch that now, it feels like such a time capsule. And I just don't feel as if that really makes it universally interesting to be able to watch at any particular point. I think that for kids the kids that grew up in the 80s like us, I feel as if it is pretty easy. But I feel like if you took a kid that is like 16 years old right now and plopped them down and watched those movies, I don't think that they're going to connect with it. And I think that if you're going to call a movie the best vampire movie of all time, I think that it has to have some of that universal appeal.
Well also I would. Lost Boys. I'm sorry, Sarah, please.
I would like to point out that we have a lot of media that has been referencing The Hunger, that has come out since The Hunger, that has come out within the last decade. We have no movies that reference Fright Night. We have a couple that do reference aspects of The Lost Boys, but there is not a single movie I know of that references Fright Night other than the remake of Fright Night, which brought it into the modern era, but not as nicely as the original.
But people knew it enough to make a remake.
They did. But it didn't.
Was the remake of The Hunger? When did they remake The Hunger?
You don't remake movies that don't need a remake.
See, that's not a fair argument, because The Thing,
really?
The Blob, and The Fly are movies that were remade, so that argument doesn't really hold water that much. But when
they were cheesy 50s movies,
so
though.
you're saying that The Fog didn't need a remake?
The Fog definitely did not. The Fog did not need a remake.
But they made one anyway, right?
Yeah. When the question was asked, Fright Night was one of the first names that popped in after The Lost Boys, but The Hunger for me never was even in the conversation, because it's not a movie that jumps out. You go on the street, you ask 100 people, name your favorite vampire, you're going to get some Fright Nights in The Lost Boys, Nosferatu's, Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1931 Dracula. I don't think that many people are going to say The Hunger. I think more people are going to say, you would, yes, but I think more people are going to go with Fright Night and or The Lost Boys. I think it has style. I think the vampires are sexy. It's got a better group of characters within the entire movie. Amanda Bierce, she's okay. She's really not that good. William Ragsdale was okay. Not really a leading man. I just think Jason Patrick, yes, it has the Coreys, but it was the 80s. I think they have a better wide group of characters throughout the entire film.
I would like to point out, as Dan said earlier, just because a mass audience knows it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the best. The Hunger may not be the one most known to everybody, but everyone that watches it gets it. And it is one that is referenced by people that have watched it. It is still referenced in modern media, everything that happened in that, because the style of that film is so iconic. It's still making waves years later.
Sarah,
It
will you
is-
wrap this
I
into
lost
your
boys in
closing
Fight Night.
arguments?
Sure. The Hunger may not be the best known of vampire movies, but it is one of the best. For me, it is the best. It is one that is still referenced by other filmmakers and musicians and television writers to this day. It is still making waves in the entertainment industry as a reference to something quintessentially vampire. Fright Night and Lost Boys, not as much. They aren't picking iconic scenes from it. It's still, they're there. I adore them. They're great movies. I absolutely love them. But when I want a vampire movie that screams vampire, I'm putting on The Hunger.
Josh brought up an excellent point that was a little damning to my argument for the dead last. But in my defense, when Noah proposed a question to us, The Lost Boys was the first one that popped into my head. So I had to go that. I had to defend it. I think it's a sexy, stylish movie. When you see vampires, what I like a vampires movie is like, would I want to be that vampire? David and his clan, yes. When I first watched that movie, I'm like, why did Michael not want to be that part of that vampire? Because they're just so cool. And because it has that allure to it. It has funny, it has hair-raising moments. I think it has everything for someone, you know, like Josh said with Fright Night. I think Lost Boys also has that. Has everything for someone. It's got a lore. It can reach a wider audience. Yes, it is 80s, but it came out in the 80s. You know, I love the special effects on it. I love the vampires on it. And that's why for my choice alone, is my favorite vampire movie.
I think when you're talking about the best vampire movie of all time, it's you have to kind of include a little bit of mass appeal. I definitely don't think it has to have super wide appeal, and it doesn't have to be the most viewed vampire movie of all time. But if you're talking about something being the best of all time and not the best to you individually, you are automatically including mass appeal. It's just part of the phrase the best of all time. There's no way around it. And The Hunger, I'm sorry, is a little bit of a forgotten film. It is a movie that is very good, that I do enjoy, although I do kind of find it a bit overly arty and pretentious at some points, to the point that I don't think that it has that mass draw. But again, the last point that I want to make is that we're talking about something as the best movie of all time, not the best movie within a specific time frame of the 1980s. And I do want to point out that the only movie in here for me that is not a time capsule of a very specific frame of time is Fright Night, which is, I think, gives it the mass appeal. And also, it's the only one that sticks to the traditional vampire rules and gives you vampires as you know them, not vampires, but we're going to move their teeth around, and vampires, but we're going to switch this up a little bit, and vampires, but we're going to change these rules, you know. So it's vampires, but not. Whereas Fright Night, it's a vampire as you know it, and there's no guessing what the rules are going to be as the movie goes along.
I want to make another point, but it's done.
Same.
I want to make another point about that last comment, but
we'll save it for after. But awesome. Yeah, I think that was another great round. I think this might be the closest one yet. Yeah, I think all three of you made very good points for your movies and like the different points that you're arguing for them. I'm kind of stuck with, Josh's point about like mass appeal to an extent and really just having the vampires be how we know them to be. I think that's a very strong argument. Dan, what are your thoughts?
In Pete's defense, I you might have seen me, like with my head down a lot. I had to check my emails. When Josh first asked us for our favorite vampire movies, I threw out Lost Boys was ranked a little ahead of Fright Night. But after I did a rewatch, because it had been some years, I did rank Fright Night higher than Lost Boys. And I think the thing is, it's not that Lost Boys isn't as good as I remembered. It's that Fright Night is so much better than I remembered. and I could watch that movie twice in one day, and it wouldn't bother me. Maybe 3 times. It's nice and short. Nobody mentioned effects. I think all 3 movies have good effects, but I think the one thing that people forget about Fright Night, it's really a tour de force of really good effects. Josh's point about it feeling more timeless is strong. I think he could have made it stronger by talking about the fact that there's a TV show within Fright Night, and this is sort of a modern thing that we see in movies a lot now. So you watch a movie like Fright Night, and you're like, you're watching a TV show. Is that real? So he kind of goes to Peter Vincent for help. It's almost like a frame within a frame concept, which I love about the movie. I would have liked to hear about that, but I still think Fright Night's really strong because one of Sarah's arguments has to do with style. I think that the vampires are incredibly stylized in all 3 movies. They just have different styles. So it becomes a matter of preference then. I love all 3 stylized vampire approaches. The Jerry Dandridge guy is incredibly stylish, and he's my favorite vampire in all movies. That long leather trench coat is killer. I mean, literally. And I just love the way he embodies it. Pete tried to address this by calling him a fruit bat, but let's be honest, he's not. It's not a fruit bat guy, even though that's kind of part of the lore he took on. His portrayal of the vampire is incredibly effective. It's devastatingly scary at times, which is nice in a movie that's really quite funny. So I love that combination. I do think it's really appealing. And so I just, you almost have to argue me away from Fright Night a little bit, in my personal opinion. And, I love The Hunger. Hadn't seen it until Sarah picked it for this. I watched it the other day. That I love. And there's all kinds of ways that I love movies like that. It makes you think more than the other movies about that concept of immortality. But Sarah was saying that, like, it deals with the idea of, is this worth it being a vampire, as it being unique to The Hunger among these 3. But that's not true, really, because there's also a subplot in The Lost Boys where you're wondering, like Pete pointed out, is it even better to become one of David and the clan? Because Michael's in that spot where, he's kind of turning, and it's almost like, well, I don't know that he thinks it's better, but the audience is like, Wally, there's some pretty awesome things about being one of the Lost Boys, Maybe I should just go that route. So it does kind of make the audience think that as well, a little bit like The Hunger, but it's a different feel. So, again, and The Hunger is a little bit forgotten, and in that, it's not all about popularity, but if you're talking about best, unfortunately, it didn't really kind of take on the subgenre as much as I'm shocked that I didn't know about it, given the cast and how good it is. I don't mind art house. Give me art house all day, but it just, I can't put it over Fright Night. And I think with Josh's argument, I think I would keep Fright Night there.
Yeah, I think
by a hair. This is a close one. All 3 rounds were super close. I love this.
Yeah, Sarah, I really liked your argument about how it is really the only one in the group and one of the only ones that's really told from the vampire perspective. I think that really the first half, when you're watching, I'm blanking on the character's name, but David Bowie's character, we're just following him around mostly. I think that's really interesting. You're listening to the heartbeats and things like that. I thought that was great. But yeah, I think that there are enough knocks on it not really like hitting like the viewers the same way. It isn't quite as beloved on like a larger scale, and it isn't quite as approachable as the other 2 films. And Uncle Pete, I feel like your biggest part of the argument I really loved was like, I want to be these vampires, which I don't think I disagree with. I think out of Jerry Dandridge, he's got a nice house. But yeah, I think by a hair, I'm going to give it to Josh as well.
Good.
I wanted to mention also that Sarah was totally right about influence, though, that unseen influences that The Hunger has. I feel like the beginning of The Hunger is like Blade. Like that club scene in Blade feels a lot like that beginning.
You're right.
That's why I put it as my number 1. It has had way more influence on vampire movies that have come after it than either of these.
No, I don't know that that's true either, honestly, because if you're really just talking about most influential vampire movie, then The Hunger becomes not the best answer anyway. So it is a strength of the movie, but we really have to talk about other movies then for most influential. But like I said, I could pick The Hunger on another debate. I couldn't really go in with my favorite.
Well,
And I will
clearly,
also-
I have washed
I will-
out and changed nobody's mind whatsoever.
I will kind of note that I think that the Fright Night is not referenced as much, or is not seen as influential, because Fright Night was about celebrating the vampires of the past and celebrating vampire lore and what we had already known about vampires, whereas both kind of Lost Boys and The Hunger were sort of about reinventing and kind of a new take on vampires. And that's why they became influential, because they were sort of a new thing, whereas Fright Night was a celebration of the classic.
You think Professor Victor would have chose Twilight if he would have tried to argue?
I know. I feel
Yes,
like
I do think that.
But I will also point out that I do really enjoy The Hunger, but it might just be because David Bowie's in it.
I mean, so far about this,
And
like
I stand.
I've loved all the movies. Everybody's answer is a fantastic answer.
Yeah.
It's not like somebody had to argue something like who could play, Freddy Krueger. Oh, Bronson Pinchot. He could play. So, but who would want to see a bulky Freddy Krueger? But so far, all the answers
ridiculous.
have been
I would totally watch it.
I would watch it. Don't
Yes,
be ridiculous.
give
I'm
me
going to
Balky.
give you.
I want to see Freddy do the dance of joy.
Also, Chris Sarandon, Susan Sarandon. Coincidence?
I think not.
Watch out for those two.
Awesome. But yeah, so it will be Josh and Uncle Pete moving on to the speed round. Sarah, you have presented 3 great arguments today. You did not lose this debate by any means. This was like
I admire
decision by
your
a hair.
passion.
And now you are going to join Dan and I as judges for the speed round.
Ooh, oh.
Comeuppance.
Let's see how this goes.
Before we even said that, Sarah, I was going to say I admire your passion for your arguments. I got to respect that.
And I admire that what she chose were clearly the 3 most challenging, in my opinion.
All right, let's do it.
I don't talk
Let's
about
go. I'm ready. I'm primed. I'm psyched.
Right.
And let me tell you, I understand the name of the game is pain.
Oh, the alter egos are coming out.
Let's see how the tables turn on this one.
Oh, you really want the alter egos to come out?
Oh no.
I'm ready for this. Come on, let's go.
I can see.
Question.
I can see.
I love it.
Now if it was Gregario. Oh, forget about it.
I love that Josh just has them at the ready.
I know why. They're in my prop drawer. I have a prop drawer.
Oh, I love it.
Awesome. So yeah, for the speed round, guys, I'm gonna state the question. Y'all are just gonna shout out answers, first come, first serve, and then whoever answers first will have a 1 minute, like basically they're gonna state their answer and argue for it. The other person will state their answer, and then each of you will get a 1 minute rebuttal after that as well. So it's very quick.
Yeah.
Awesome. A trailer was recently released for David Cronenberg's new movie, Crimes of the Future. What is Cronenberg's best movie?
The Fly.
Videodrome.
All right. Uncle Pete, you're going to go first. You have 1 minute. Go.
The Fly. It's scary. It's intriguing. The score by Howard Shore. It's just so incredible. Watching Seth Brundle, Jeff Goldblum's performance. You see Seth. Not only does he transform into Brundlefly, but his psychological transformation. He starts to love it. He starts to accept it, even though his body parts are falling off. He's like, "Wait, I'm becoming this new thing." And his statement on insect politics and everything. It's such an intriguing film. Some of the best special effects in the history of cinema. They took an original movie and they made a remake that was light years better than the original. It's scary. It's intriguing. It's downright sad at the end. The performances are fantastic. One of the best body horrors I've ever seen in horror. Arguably one of the best remakes ever made.
Time. Very good. All right, Josh, Videodrome, you've got 1 minute. Go.
When you think about Cronenberg, you think of 2 things: weird horniness and body transformations. And Videodrome has both of those nonstop. There's no more Cronenberg-y movie than Videodrome. He has plenty of movies that he creates a new story, that he incorporates some of these things, but Videodrome is an entire movie that is essentially his style to the max. It's all his themes, it's all his tropes, it's exactly what you think. Plus, it's an original story. It's concocted, and it is basically based around his methodology and his own particular fetishes, which are very prevalent all throughout this film. And it's just, when you think of Cronenberg, I think of Videodrome.
All right, Pete, you're going to get a 1 minute rebuttal. Ready, set, go.
Josh brings up great points about the body horror and like the sexiness of Videodrome. I think The Fly, maybe not so much the sexiness, but it's got as good, if not better, body horror, and the symbolism in it, how it can pretty much reference the whole AIDS epidemic. The Fly is a movie that can make you think afterwards, what was the director really trying to say? The fact that Seth is, embracing this transformation at the end, and it invokes so many feelings at the end after he tries to merge with Gina Davis's character, and then she has to kill him at the end. You see her just so broken that the performances are just, I think they beat James Woods and the other performances in Videodrome. The performances by Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis are they're legendary in the history of horror.
All right, Josh, you get a 1 minute rebuttal as well. Ready, set, go.
It's hard to argue against The Fly, because The Fly is an excellent movie, but I think Videodrome is probably equally excellent. So for me, what it comes down to is which is the better Cronenberg movie. And honestly, The Fly is a movie that is source material adapted to fit his quirks into it, whereas Videodrome is a movie that is entirely draped around his quirks. So you have The Fly, where you have slight of his sort of fetishisms kind of put in there, because it's Cronenberg, so he has to get some of that stuff in there, whereas Videodrome is a full embodied embracement of people sticking their hands in vaginas in their bellies and weird like things coming out of TVs and reaching and wrapping around. I mean, that's Cronenberg. You are getting some weird stuff in The Fly, but you're not getting anything that is specifically Cronenberg like you get in Videodrome with hands that are guns.
All right, awesome. Ooh, both great movies, both very fun arguments. Sarah, what were your thoughts?
I happen to agree with Josh. I think that Videodrome is the more Cronenbergian of the two. I'm not going to argue that The Fly is not a good movie. I mean, that would be stupid. But in terms of what film is the greatest Cronenberg movie, I have to give it to Josh. It is Videodrome, because it is just so Cronenberg. You compare some of his stuff from his earlier times to that movie, you can see the follow through of thought from those early movies into this one. So for me, I give the point to Josh.
Awesome. Dan, what about you?
I'll give it to Pete, because the question wasn't what's the Cronenbergiest Cronenberg movie. It was what's the best Cronenberg movie. And I understand if it's a tie, you'll come up with a tiebreaker, and you might say this fits within Cronenberg's career better, and Videodrome does. But I do think that if you're just looking at those two movies alone, they're both incredibly good. But I think Goldblum is a little better than James Woods in that role, although James Woods finally finds the right role for him, because he's awful. Not as an actor, but as a person.
Yeah.
But Goldblum is just so much more of an interesting actor, and that character. Also, to say that the body horror is kind of just a drop in The Fly and not really that Cronenberg-y is a little ridiculous, because of the medicine chest and the length of time that it takes and all the different scenes and where Brundlefly goes from point A to point Z. The ending is so much better to me than the ending of Videodrome and The Fly, which Pete pointed out. And the fact that it's one of the better remakes of all time, I love that. I'll give it a little bit of a tick for that, but it doesn't even need the tick for me. I just, by a hair, I'll go with Pete on this. Just because the fact that it's not as Cronenberg-y as Videodrome, not as central to me.
Yeah, I'm definitely right in between where both of you are standing. Like, I very much like love that it is like really quintessential Cronenberg, but also, yeah, The Fly just being like a really fantastic adaptation. Uncle Pete really sold me in his first opening art. He just nailing everything that is fantastic about The Fly. He nailed the performances, the body horror, the transformation. Just very good opening, and I think
score.
I'm narrowly going to give it to you, Pete.
I mean, it's hard to argue against someone like Josh with that stuff. It's not easy. He comes guns a-blazing. He doesn't make it easy.
What I found interesting about that was everything he said about The Fly, you could also say about Videodrome, except a couple of things like scary, intriguing, special effects, and then it got about the differences, like the ending. Then you start to get and the actors. Then it becomes really fine, detailed differences.
That was a tough one for me because I do love The Fly.
Yeah, I think for me, Videodrome is my favorite Cronenberg film. But yeah, I think just like the little things like Goldblum versus James Woods, I think was a good argument. But yeah, okay. So it's now 4-4. We're tied up. Speed round question number 2. Who is the sexiest slasher villain?
Candyman.
Ooh.
Damn. That's a tough one to beat. And I'm drawing damn, Josh may kill this one. Oh, Michael Myers. Hey,
Awesome.
I'm gonna try.
All right, Josh, you're gonna get a 1-minute opener. Ready, set, go.
Yeah, so Candyman is clearly the sexiest. He's got a sense of style. He looks great. He is a romantic killer. He's killing in the name of romance. And he's got those sweet, dulcet tones of Tony Todd dripping with sexuality. And let's face it, when the man says, "Be my victim," yeah, you kind of want to. Yeah, he's the only mass murderer that I think people swoon over in all of horror.
It's almost impossible to argue that one. I drew a blank on it, but I could argue saying, is Candyman really a slasher? Yes, it is. Is Michael Myers sexy? Maybe for those really weird people that if he was in prison and, like women send serial killers love letters and stuff like that. Maybe, but yeah, insert foot and mouth saying Michael Myers, because he wears a mask. Is he really sexy? There's no sex appeal in him. I mean, I put my foot in the mouth on that one, and I have to concede that point to Josh. There's no, I mean, come on.
Ooh.
I have no chance. I have to concede that points to Josh.
Oh, we've never had a forfeit before. Okay,
I mean,
point to Josh. I mean, Candyman was going to be very hard.
There's no way
It
I
was
could
an
argue
uphill
against
battle.
Candyman. I'm just being honest.
All
Josh
right,
takes a 3-point lead.
or just a 2-point lead now. So yeah, the score is 6-4.
Okay.
So yeah, Josh, if you win this next one, you win the game. Pete, you'll have to get 2 questions to win.
Okay.
All right, so get the clock back up. All right, so speed round question number 3. News is already stirring around a 6th Scream sequel. Who is the best ghost face we've seen so far?
Billy Loomis.
Jesus Christ! I'm trying to think of who it is in the other movies. The best ghost face we've seen so far. I guess I guess I'm gonna go with Stu.
All right, yes. Uncle Pete, you're gonna go first. You got 1 minute. Ready, set, go.
First Scream is the best Scream out of the entire franchise. And I think Billy had the best motivation, wanted to get revenge on Sydney and her family because he blamed her for breaking up, his family with the affair and everything. And I really can't go with Stu because he just manipulated Stu to go along with him. Stu was pretty much just a follower. If it was not for Billy, Stu probably wouldn't have started killing all these people. He was more of a follower than the actual ghost-faced killer. Billy was able to manipulate Stu into killing for him, so he can get revenge on Sydney and her family. He set the precedence for all other ghost faces.
Awesome. All right, Josh, you get a 1 minute opener as well. Ready, set, go.
Yeah, it's very possible that Stu actually accomplished more of the killings and did more of the stuff in Scream anyway. So even though Billy might be the more notable of the two, Stu got more of the stuff done. The most iconic kill of the series, Casey Becker, Drew Barrymore, that's Stu. Rose McGowan in the garage, I guess it's arguable, but to me, that's Stu. He's the one killing most people. He's the one that's in one of the most iconic scenes where he's sneaking up behind Jamie Kennedy, where he's on the couch. That's Stu. He's the one that kills the cameraman in the car. That's Stu. Stu's the most effective and efficient of the killers. And let's face it, when most people think of Ghostface, one of the most iconic things about Ghostface is his goofiness and falling down and his vulnerability, which is because of Stu. He's the one that's the kind of the klutzy killer that's falling down or whatever, which is what everybody kind of attributes to that character.
Awesome. All right, Pete, you're going to get one more a 1 minute rebuttal. Ready, set, go.
Josh brings up good points that Stu was this in, he may have had more kills, and it's just because he did the research, for his channel on that. But I go back to my initial argument. 'Twas not for Billy, Stu would not have killed all these people. I think he killed all of them because he was easily manipulated by Billy Loomis. That's why he had all these kills, because of the essence of Billy being there telling Stu, hey, we need to go do this, this, and this, and accomplish all of this so we can get revenge because my mom left me on this. 'Twas not for Billy, Stu would not have taken up the helm of Ghostface to try and kill these people. And I can argue that, are you sure it's Stu in most of these kills? Because he is wearing a mask. Some of the times it could have been Billy. You're not 100% sure it was Stu. If it wasn't for Billy, Stu would not have killed anybody.
Awesome. And Josh, go.
Doesn't that actually make Stu more interesting, though? Because Billy has a rationale and a motivation for doing things. He wants revenge for being abandoned by his mother and kind of like getting back at people. Stu just does it because he thinks it's fun. Doesn't that actually kind of make him a little bit more disturbing and more scary? I think so. That makes me a little bit more wary. You have the option of being nervous about the kid who's abandoned by his mom that lives in the trailer and has this crappy life, versus the kid that lives in a fancy mansion and has everything, including a very attractive girlfriend that will sleep with him, unlike Billy. So there's really no motivation for him to go insane and start killing people, yet he does, which is way more effective in my mind. It makes him a little bit creepier than Billy. And yeah, he did do those killings.
Ooh, very good. Awesome. Yeah, this one was very close for me. Two different arguments, but I think y'all pitched it the right way. I think I'm leaning towards Josh's final argument about being much more motiveless. But yeah, Sarah and Dan, what do y'all think?
I would go with Pete on this, but it's not because of Josh's arguments not being good. Because honestly, when you said Billy Loomis, I'm like, well, that's it. I mean, because after that, it becomes an assortment of others. The thing is, if the strength of Stu's argument is that he killed more of those people, then you're talking about kill count, and I'm thinking that future movies, Scream movies, maybe other Ghostfaces are better with kill count. But Stu is a good argument in terms of that faceless, pointless, why is he even killing people? Maybe a little more scary. But I do tend to really feel that Billy Loomis's character, the fact that we know the motivation, Scream is more about that than it is about Michael Myers being the faceless unknown. Why is he a killer? So that does work in other horror franchises, but I think Scream is really about the why. It's about the mystery. And I think the payoff of Billy Loomis is much more rewarding. I think that character is sort of much personally more, agreeable with me, that because I think that Stu is actually a problem in the movie. Now, he doesn't make me like Ghostface. He kind of makes me hate Ghostface. But yeah, I think, Billy Loomis for me is the guy. And I think that the arguments were close, but I again, close margin to Pete.
Sarah, what were your thoughts?
Josh has the benefit of having read all of my issues with Scream for Dead Blast. And he brought up the very points that I made, in that it's more terrifying to have someone killing who has no motivation to kill. It's a realistic terror, and it's usually in the real world, a lot of times there is no motive for why certain people are killed. And as a true crime junkie, that is terrifying. And often the victims are women. So again, terrifying for me. And I think I pointed that out in my Dead Last rankings, was that I did not enjoy it because it was too realistic. The fact that it's just like, we're just going to kill for the lulz. Yeah, that's not really outside the realm of possibility. And therefore, I kind of have to give it to Josh because he used my own arguments against me.
I will say I did not remember that. So.
All right, awesome. But Josh, that means you are today's winner. Congratulations.
I kind of wanted you to give it to Pete so we can go the other round.
I think it was a close round, but yeah, Uncle Pete, great arguments today. And I mean, I do have the last question if y'all just want to go for it.
What was the last question? I'd love to hear it.
It is, which is the better film, Alien or Aliens?
Aliens.
Oh, okay. Well, Alien.
Yeah, I would have said Aliens.
Awesome.
I'm just happy it was close. Shoot, we didn't make it easy. So
no, that was
yeah.
All
thank you all so much for participating. You did a great job, Josh. Congratulations, and yeah, I hope to see y'all back on an episode at some point in the future. And yeah,
Gladly.
Oh yeah, I'd love to.
Love that.
All right,
Let's
thanks for
do
watching Hamburgers and Horror, y'all. Stay safe out there.